Hey folks, it is March the 3rd, and this is our dual credit 1301 course, and we're still talking about our unit that has to do with, the New Republic. So this is still during the presidency of George Washington, president number 1, in case you didn't know that. And see, we're going to lecture today and tomorrow, but please don't forget, we're not doing anything next week because it's spring break. So now if you want to read your textbook, that'd be more power to you, provided you have it. So yeah, you're expected to buy the textbook, but if you want to borrow one on campus, I'll let you do it, but I'm not going to let you take it like home. So, because I have these spares. We were talking about Jay's Treaty. And so our sovereignty, especially on the seas, was not being respected. We had problems with Native Americans who were paid by the British attacking our frontier. So we wanted to stay out of the war, but we also didn't want people killing us. Reasonable thing. Reasonable. Gosh, I gotta fix this. Okay. So going back to John Jay. So if you've read the Constitution, which you probably should, it's basically like a 5-page pamphlet. It's not that hard to read. You notice in the original Constitution, unamended, you have Article 1, 2, and 3. Article 1 and Article 2 talk a lot about the powers of Congress and then the presidency. Article 3 is very vague and sparse in what it says the Supreme Court can do. But it does say in Article 1 that Congress can make, they can make federal judges. They can appoint them and all that stuff. So, of course, the president appoints, but they approve. So that brings us to one of the first acts of Congress is the Judiciary Act of 1789. They're like, well, we need some courts across our new country, so let's establish them. So this is going to establish the Supreme Court and the lower federal courts. The Constitution doesn't say anything about how many Supreme Court justices you need. It doesn't even really specify too much on what they have to do. Honestly, they could have just appointed one and tell them to play cards in the basement. That would have been it. But they decided to give them a job instead. So they also established the lower federal courts, which are often used. Of course, you can appeal up through the federal courts all the way up to the Supreme Court. But also, sometimes federal courts can make a final decision, and it doesn't have to make it to the Supreme Court. If you watch the news, you'll see this happens to issues all the time. The act set the number of Supreme Court justices at 6 and 1 Chief Justice. So 1 Chief Justice, 5 Associate Justices. They didn't have that odd number or that 9 that would be good for tie breaking like we have today. They gave the Supreme Court the right to review state laws and state court decisions and to determine their constitutionality. So it's one of the principles of our American system, of a constitutional system, is that all laws must fit within the framework, the legality of the Constitution. And if it's not Constitution, as in the Constitution says you can't do that, or if you're a constructionist, it doesn't specifically say it, then you can't do it. The court could also review any treaty made by the federal government. Washington chose John Jay as the first Chief Justice. So there he is again, John Jay. And so at first, all was well. The courts were established. But later on, we're going to see.
How did Washington know John Jay?
I don't honestly remember. I don't want to lie to you. I'm not sure if he had a part in the revolution or not either. So I'm sorry. Next one. Okay, so we outlined some of the things that Washington did in office, but after serving 2 terms, he grew tired of the position. He wanted to go back to his farm. His heart was always to go back to his lands. He wanted to live essentially as a gentleman farmer. And like we told you, that was something that the founders really, that was their ideal lifestyle, is you wanted to be like an English gentleman. And so that's what he did. So the post-war economic depression was over. So I didn't really mention this, but one of the consequences of the American Revolution is that a lot of American industry lost its markets, and because the colonies did a lot of their trading with England. Well, when you're at war with the country, they don't trade with you. And shortly following the war, we didn't have a lot of trade with them either. But finally, we were getting back on our feet. The wars in Europe led to a demand in American food. So that's one thing we had, was a lot of farmland. We could ship things like grain and stuff like that over. So that helped boost our farmers and our shipping. But bitter political fights between Hamilton, Jefferson, and Madison left Washington ready to retire after 2 terms. So got tired of the drama. Poor Georgie. And so he gave his farewell address. I might have y'all read that here coming up. We shall see. It's a good piece of American rhetoric. And he made these 3 main points in it. And one thing you're going to notice about Washington's speech is that it's a patriotic piece. It's a religious piece. It's a piece of warning as well. And he urged the nation to be neutral and steer clear of permanent alliances with any foreign country. He recognized the dangers of political parties, which, if you remember from Federalist papers, is what Madison called factions, and warned that their infighting could weaken the nation. His advice contributed to many future U.S. foreign policy decisions. We are always going to have this love-hate relationship with isolationism as Americans, where we will retreat back to it. Be like, leave the world alone. You have our own problems to take care of, but we just keep getting sucked back into European affairs. Of course, we do get in some permanent alliances eventually. And neutrality is a hard thing to stay out of. And parties are going to form immediately after he exits office, the first real presidential race. But yep, being the first is important by default. Think of some other things that being the first of was important. But the first Roman emperor, Caesar Augustus, right? Mm-hmm. He probably set a lot of precedents. When you think about it, he had so many implied powers. He was deified. He commanded the armies, lawmaking, just about everything, So, what about Alexander the Great did too? It's a lot of things like how even the Diadochoi after him would wear crowns and sit on thrones like Persian emperors, but at the same time lead soldiers into combat. I don't know. All right, you ready? These transitions are horrible. All right, our second. Wow, I gotta edit that. Our second president is John Adams. So, the election of 1796 was our first contested presidential election, which led to John Adams, who was, if you remember, he had a part in the American Revolution. Remember, and so did his opponent, Thomas Jefferson. Well, Adams is going to have around him coalesce the Federalists. And so the Federalists are basically revolving around those ideas we talked about from Alexander Hamilton. Strong central government, an English-styled industrial economy with a top-down approach of the government helping out certain businesses for foreign trade. And of course, the opposition, Thomas Jefferson, had the Democratic Republican Party. And he's going to turn out as vice president. Because at this time, before you have, the 12th Amendment, the guy who wins second place is going to I might have that mixed up. The guy who wins second place is going to be vice president. So that's how you can have a president in one party and a vice president in another party. But the system wasn't made to have parties in mind. And so it's just a fluke. Though they had differing political views, Adams was a statesman who put character over politics and remained a close friend to his fellow patriot, Thomas Jefferson. And they will for a while. Later, they're going to have a falling out. They're going to despise one another. But what's funny is, like, eventually they're going to make up and they're going to be friends again before they both die. So it's be like a feud until they're like old, smelly old men. And they'll be like, I'm sorry, I love you. I love you too. Have some nice, friendly letters. So good times, good times.
I wasn't done.
Oh, I'm sorry. Moving too fast. No, I'm not trying to rush you. I'm not trying to rush you. I think I'm going to be mean when I do this in the summer. I think I'm not going to show any of them the notes. I think I'm just going to print them for me to look at and pretend I memorized all of it.
Oh.
So,
You mean like every professor has?
yeah.
Why did they do that?
That's what the first universities always did. The first textbooks were basically like, it's like it was an inherited position. Like, dad's a professor, son inherits that position when dad retires, and dad hands off his notes, and then the son just goes off and reads the notes. It was like that in Italy too. They basically just read out of a book, and you copied what they read to you, with little discussion, debate, or anything like that. So that's what the medieval university system in the Renaissance was based around. It's not going to be until after that till you start having what we call classical education come up. But I don't know. It's kind of easier. Not everybody's tech savvy enough to turn on the computer and a projector. I don't know. But I don't know. I mean, some professors do that. I mean, like I've never had a history professor show me his or her notes, but I've always, like, whenever I've taken like electives for like psych or something like that, they would just have made PowerPoints made by book publishers usually or something. And so I don't know. It's just the way it is. All right, so I think we're ready now. Don't worry, I've never ever seen even a math professor use notes. Like, really, they know what concepts or equations they're going to go over for the day, and then it's just all chalk time. So, all right, so the XYZ affair. During the election of 1796.
That's in like seventh grade.
Yeah, wait, what? I showed you this in seventh grade?
8th grade.
Yeah, it's probably 8th grade. Yeah.
Probably.
I might have made this one when y'all were 8th grade or when you were in 7th grade, but I need to clean it up.
I think it's like the history.
Because when I made this for the 8th graders, I used my notes from when I took this class here way back 20 years ago and my old textbook. So my professor's notes and my textbook, and I had to look and see what the state wanted. And so I didn't really have to leave anything out. I just had to align it properly. But it is, PowerPoint doesn't leave it clean, because whenever you do a PowerPoint on Chrome, it messes with the font size and the transitions, all that stuff. Chrome just doesn't like to work. All right, so President John Adams, he's going to face, of course, some scandals during his time, and we're going to see even John Adams, a guy who's around during the adoption of the Constitution, and more importantly, the Bill of Rights, is going to violate some of those rights. So this is going to be very scandalous. Well, first, let's start off with the XYZ affair. During the election of 1796, France sought to influence. So, yeah, that always happens. Countries always try to influence one another's elections, sometimes through spying, sometimes through just, pamphlets, and a little money here and there. So they publicly favored Thomas Jefferson, Remember, Thomas Jefferson, the Democratic Republicans, were the guys who favored the French Revolution, that radical French Revolution. And they were like, we owe France our aid. And they're having a revolution like us because they love liberty and hate kings. Of course, they went overboard, if you remember. France then broke off relations with the U.S. after the Federalist candidate, Adams, won. So they were like, oh, that guy, the guy who likes England? So, poo-poo. Adams then sent Charles Pinckney as a diplomat to France, but the French refused to even admit him. It's like, please, listen to my ambassador. We can be friends, right? It's like, no, we're not even going to talk. No. So following that, the French began to seize our ships. So that's our sovereignty. This is an act of war. Of course, we can't go to war with France at this time, but still, that's a big deal, Pickle. Adams pressed Congress to build up our military so that the U.S. would not be humiliated under a colonial spirit of fear and sense of superiority. So, what's he saying here? He's saying we're no longer subjects to a king, a mere colony. We are a nation, and so you got to build up a military, which is an expensive thing. The founders at first did not want to have a standing army, because they thought that this was the rule or the tools of tyrants, of people who were totalitarians, dictators, and kings. So this is definitely, we're seeing early America is already having some changes that are very different from what the Patriots wanted at first. So that they're saying, well, reality, people are dying, so let's do a couple of things, kind of change it. Can you see that ugly cartoon? All right, so XYZ affair continued. There we go. One more. Yeah. All right. So President Adams also sent John Marshall and Eldridge Gerry to aid Pinckney and arrange for peace. So once again, he's like, we gotta see if we can stop this diplomatically. We can't quite afford to go to war. He doesn't want to go to war. The nation doesn't quite want to go to war, though we will get more and more amped up for one against England later. So the French foreign minister, Talleyrand, refused to see them for weeks. And so at last, three international businessmen decided to act as intermediaries since they were losing money from lack of trade. They were like, look, our boats are being taken off. They won't talk to our government. Maybe they'll talk to us. They reported to the Americans that the French would hear them if they paid a bribe. Pinckney declined and was deeply offended. He was like, that's totally corrupt. But that's how the French revolutionaries operated. The French government, the revolutionary government, was really strapped for cash at this time. Like I told you, they were essentially at a world war. The only victories that they were having, if I remember correct, during this time period was Napoleon fighting against Italy. The rest of France, their armies were half starved, running out of munitions, and being beaten back by the Austrians and everybody else. So it wasn't too good for them. All right. So to keep businessmen's identities concealed, Pinckney would only refer to these three individuals as X, Y, and Z, even to Adams. So he had an oath that he would talk to these businessmen. They said, well, the French said you got to pay up, but he wouldn't divulge their names. So that's why we call it the XYZ affair. Don't worry, the American people will find out about this business, and they're going to blame Adams for it. What? Have y'all thought about taking any college courses during the summer? Kind of knock some stuff out, or y'all got other plans?
No, my summers are gonna be focused on me trying to save money.
Okay.
Two.
Well, I was just wondering. I'm trying to remember. I don't quite remember if you qualify for Pell Grants while you're still in high school or not. I think you have to be out of high school first. I think you have to have either a diploma or a GED. I'm just trying to remember. There might be other grants and stuff, but I don't know a lot about a lot of grants and things. Like I got a few. They were always like degree or veteran focused whenever I was coming through. And I didn't qualify for a lot of them because the state waived my tuition most of the time. Nope, you already go for free. No money for you. So, I don't know what there is for high school. I don't know. Because I know when my wife was your age, she went to classes after school and then during the summers, but she kind of overdid it. But taking a class here and there in the summer wouldn't be that bad of an idea.
Wait, so
What?
did we eventually find out who the three businessmen were?
Historians think they know who they are, but it's one of those things. I'm not sure if it's solid. I can't say I know their names, right? So, Adams pressed further for an increase in military forces. It's like, these guys aren't going to let off, and they're all corrupt and trying to take our money. They'll probably just run off with it anyways. Congress created the Department of the Navy. They also authorized privateering against French ships. So, these are called writs of, it's in the Constitution, gosh, writs of something. And it's in the Constitution today. Congress can hire mercenaries, or pay pirates. So we did it to attack the French ships. A standing army of 20,000 troops was initiated, and the militias were expanded to 30,000. Even Washington came out of retirement to lead this new army. Though many ships were sunk on both sides, Congress never officially declared war. And so we had some naval spats. Now, the army didn't go into any battles against French troops, but we were training them up just in case they decided to attack us. Of course.
So the Navy is the oldest of the armed forces?
Use the army because because the army starts its birthday, if I remember right, in the Revolution after First Continental Congress. Pretty sure. I said, start getting some guys ready. We don't want to fight the king, but just in case, go ahead and get some munitions and get the boys together on the weekend. Well, that's what the militia used to be. I mean, I guess it's still like that. There's one of those things. It's like, what's the definition of the militia? It used to be a word that Americans would say, yeah, I'm in a militia, and they'd say it with pride. But if you say it these days, people get scared of you. So I think it's because of a lot of bad press from the 90s. But yeah, the militias throughout most of American history were essentially people, neighbors who got together and they would train, kind of, and they would also like get together as a posse. I mean, sometimes you still have communities that do that today. If you live like in an area where it takes a sheriff an hour to get to you, you and your neighbors might have to get together as a posse to put down like wild dogs or something like that, so they don't kill the neighbor kids. Like that kind of thing still happens out in the States. I wouldn't quite call that a militia, but some historians say that when they're saying the militia, they're talking about what we would consider today to be the military and the National Guard. But some say it's actually individuals who get together of their own free volition and aren't necessarily sworn to any kind of unit. I don't know. It's the second part of the Second Amendment, so knowing what it means sounds a little important. Next one. All right, so like I told you, so we're going to have federal governments under the Adams administration step on some of those individual rights that we were so proud of with the Bill of Rights. And that comes to the Alien Sedition Acts. So, Adams was known as being kind of a thin-skinned guy. He couldn't take insults all that well. And so it's going to help relate to some of this. So, this term applied to 4 acts designed to silence the anti-federalist and limit immigration. So by anti-federalist, I mean the people who are like Democrat Republicans, not necessarily the guys who wrote the anti-federalist papers, though I'm sure some of them may have been like this. Hamilton and the other Federalists wished to up the war against France and believed that naturalized citizens posed a threat to the nation. So the idea, according to Alexander Hamilton, was that people who newly immigrated to America at this time were more favorable to France and more favorable to Thomas Jefferson. It was the more established Americans who had been here for generations and were more of English ancestry that were urbanites. They lived in the cities, they had trades that had to do with commerce and building things, so they were naturally more Federalist. And so you see, we have one of the first times where we have immigration is coming up as a political hot potato issue, right? So the first was the Naturalization Act of 1798, which extended the residency requirement for citizenship from 5 to 14 years. So 14 years, that's kind of a long time. I'm sure, especially to y'all, that's a really long time. So part of this was to shut down the vote and ensure that the Federalists could stay in power. They're essentially strangling the vote, or keeping certain people out of it. The second was the Alien Act of 1798. This law allowed the president to deport any foreigner he judged to be dangerous to the peace and safety of the United States. So, of course, we're going to have laws like this come again later, especially as you remember during the Cold War, the early part of the Cold War, or the Red Scares, getting rid of people who were communists, imprisoning them, and even at times putting them on boats and sending them off to Russia. So we don't quite do that now, though. I don't think we like round up jihadists and throw them back in the Middle East. So, but I guess that would have been something similar. The thing is, though, it says dangerous to the peace and safety of the United States. That's the worst part. Who gets to decide if you're against the peace and safety of the U.S.? It's the president and his henchmen. So they could say anybody is. And you don't have a right to trial. You can just get put on a boat and be like, boop, get out of here. So that's a lot of power against people's individual rights that just one man can decide. Judge, jury, and executioner. Needless to say, these weren't very popular. At least. All right, let's go to another one. So, heating up. All right, but don't worry, there's more. There's always so much more. The Alien and Sedition, all right, so another act of the Alien and Sedition Acts is in plural. The Alien Enemies Act of 1798 allowed the president to banish people in prison, any foreigner he felt dangerous during national emergency. So, like I said, he can either kick you out of the country, or the president, if he thinks that you're dangerous, can put you in prison. And national emergencies they come and go, and they can stick around for a long time. In fact, if I remember right, the nation's actually under quite a few national emergencies right now. And I'm not talking about recent things. There is, we're still under a national emergency from COVID. Let me look that up real quick. Of course, President Trump signed one for like a border national emergency. The thing is, I think when he came to office, there was already 5 in place. Say, how many national emergencies are active? Let's see here. The U.S. has 31 national emergencies. Oh, that's 2019, so don't worry. So I'm sure we have quite a few right now.
There's more.
Here's a list.
Just about 10 more.
Here's a list of the national emergencies. Let me look here. ABC News. Come on. That's 2019 as well. Zoomed in too much. Well, hot dog and gravy. Here's one from 1979. National emergency regarding Iran. National emergency with respect to proliferations of weapons of mass destruction.
Why did that happen?
Transactions with terrorists. I don't know. That one was signed in 1994 by Bill Clinton.
Makes sense.
And it's still not over.
No, still not over. 1995, prohibiting transactions with terrorists who want to disrupt Middle East peace. Like there's over 30 of them. A lot of them have to do with drugs and terrorism, Cuba, and Eastern Europe. Good grief. Yeah, there's a lot of blocking property of persons undermining democratic process in Zimbabwe. Okay.
That's random.
No, we have a national emergency regarding Zimbabwe. Syria and Iraq stuff. Belarus. Gotta watch out for those Slavs. Lebanon. Congo. Yeah, there, Korea.
We have a thing for our churches.
There was one that was super recent. What was it? It was like Myanmar or something, or it was really like, it was just like cyber attacks from China.
No, not cyber attacks from China.
The situation in Burundi. So go find Burundi on a map. Go.
Bet. I got it right now.
So, okay, I'm going to stop this. And that goes up to 2019. So we're just going to stop looking there. And that's excluding COVIDs. So, but yeah, emergency powers, they can do a lot of things. They can make, it takes an act of Congress to end an emergency power declaration. But they also, one of the reasons they're called for is they can unlock certain funds that can be used for all kinds of things and stuff. So, and of course, presidential powers. So, back to this fun stuff: national emergencies. All right. So finally, the Federalists passed the Sedition Act to silence those who oppose them. There you go. First Amendment. Bye bye. Especially pro-Jefferson press. This act also sought to prohibit the publication or utterance. That's when you say something. I had a problem with that yesterday. Of any and all criticisms of the government. If you say, I'm not sure I like that law, that could be sedition. And sedition is, where you're saying something that is traitorous. So that's not good. That's not good. So opponents couldn't really do anything in the federal government. Adams controlled it. So here's what Jefferson and Madison decide to do. And this is the type of thing that's going to be done later on before the Civil War. They're going to try to nullify the federal law. They're like, we have the 9th and the 10th Amendment. The 9th and the 10th Amendment give our states rights that the federal government cannot violate. Well, nobody has really looked at the 9th and 10th Amendment in a couple of centuries, but back then they thought it was important. And so they took their opposition to state legislatures, Virginia and Kentucky resolutions. They argued these laws violated, once again, the 10th Amendment. So you can't do that. That's against the Constitution. You're violating the Constitution. Therefore, it's unconstitutional, and so we will not recognize it. in our states. Forget that. You still have nullification today. Nullification of federal law on things like marijuana. States pass usage of it, even though it's against federal law. Stop it. Okay, so like you had that. It was like that with gay marriage for a while there until the Supreme Court got involved, and where some states were pushing for it and were going to nullify it. So states do nullification all the time. There's also threats of nullification all the time. Like some states threaten nullification if there's like certain gun laws passed or immigration laws, for example. That gets pushed into nullification in some states, depending on what your constituency wants. All right. Hey, Peace at Labs. Thank you, Napoleon. All right. So Talleyrand.
You know, boy.
Talleyrand eventually decided to request for a new American diplomat so that the peace might be brokered. So Adams sent William Bunsbury to Paris. Hamilton and his supporters wanted war with France. Remember, he was big English guy. He's like, I don't like England. Everything England does is great. So let's go fight some French people for no reason. And publicly criticized Adams. So Hamilton, Adams' ally, criticized him. Angered and betrayed, Adams fired 3 of Hamilton's friends from his cabinet. When Murray made it to France, he found Napoleon Bonaparte was now in charge. He began his rule in November 9, 1799. Napoleon welcomed peace, and the two signed a convention of Montefiore, I think is how you say it, ending the quasi-war. So yeah, Napoleon, he's a very ambitious little general from Naples. And so being super successful and really into himself and really good at writing back home to Paris about his successes and his heroism and how his troops loved him. He made himself into this romantic figure. And so when he came back to Paris, he managed to put down some violent uprisings, and people saw him as like somebody who represented peace and stability in France that was basically almost driven to cannibalism, how crazy it got. And, whenever people live in chaos, they want stability, they want law and order. And one of some political scientists point out that ultra democracy almost always leads to a dictatorship. And he was willing to fulfill that. And so first he goes in, he shares power with others, but eventually, kind of like Hitler, who started off sharing power as well when he first made it into power, he's going to get rid of the other guy and take over by himself. So, little Emperor Napoleon. It was actually pretty good for us Americans because he couldn't attack us. But if we were close enough to him, we probably wouldn't have liked him at all. I think we'll do one more slide and we'll probably call it good after that. I'm trying to figure out in my head if we're making a good pace because we're going to finish up Adams pretty soon. And then we got to talk about Jefferson, Madison. We got to make it all the way up through there. And then, I don't know. I'm kind of thinking about skipping my little snippet on Texas history, though it hurts a little. In fact, I think yesterday was Texas Independence Day on Washington on the Brazos. Delegates declare independence from Santa Ana. All right, let's go to the next one. Did you say wait?
Can you go back for like 3 seconds? Not literally 3 seconds. But,
Sorry. I think I'm trying to be on pacing. I'm about to take the week off. We got one more lecture of this
Spring break is next week.
next week.
okay,
All of next.
Didn't I show y'all the new A/B day calendar? I posted on
You
Google
did
last
post
week.
it.
You can also go on Google. Is this an calendar?
A. And we are going to have a house meeting every A week now, except for Good Friday. And for some reason on the 23rd of April, we got a half day. It's not a holiday. It's not a teacher work day, so I don't know what it is.
Just because. Yay, I have
I feel like
it.
the whole thing. Half day, pog.
Mhm. So we'll see, kids. We'll see. I mean,
Your thing.
but
Something.
I need to double check when the last day for this semester is. Gosh, I don't remember. I gotta look at the little calendar thing. Hey, great. That's a good place for us to stop. The next election. So Adams was not very popular after those 4 years. And so this really gave Jefferson something to run on. The press at this time became very political and critical. For one, they became more partisan. For two, a lot of them, like if your job is hurt by a politician, you probably don't like that politician very much, right? So, like if you worked in the oil fields, you probably wouldn't like a president that said bad things against oil. Or if you worked for solar panels, you probably wouldn't like a president that doesn't want solar panel subsidies, So it's just like that today too. The Democratic Republican press said that Adams was a monarchist and a spendthrift. A monarchist, a king. He was like gobbling up all this personal power and stepping on the little guy. And a spendthrift, well, like doing things like building navies and trying to fund business ventures and stuff like that's pretty expensive. And that he was bent on stealing away liberty. Well, didn't look so good. On the other hand, the opposition press painted Jefferson that same press painted Jefferson as a man of the people and understood what normal people wanted. He wasn't a very normal person, but he liked normal people, and that was important. Jefferson was a brilliant man. He had some faults, but he was also very skilled at things like engineering, foreign languages, history. He wasn't a very good public speaker. We'll talk about that later. Yeah, but he's a good writer. So the Federalist Press, this is the opposition, said that Adams was steady-handed and supported Christian values. Yet they characterized Jefferson as being a dangerous radical and an immoral atheist. In fact, the press was so hard against Jefferson, they said that Jefferson, if he became president, would confiscate all your Bibles and burn them. And so it's kind of funny, when Jefferson did take office, a lot of pastors wrote him letters saying, please, sir, don't take our Bibles. And he was like, oh, what? No, I'm not going to really do that. I'm like, no. They called him an atheist because he probably was a deist. He actually made his own edited Bible. He didn't believe in miracles. So he took a Bible and he just cut out anything that had to do with miracles in it until he had something much smaller. Yeah, a smaller Bible. So he thought of it like a story of moral tales, right? He was one of those kind of people. So they were like, which, I don't know. So, yep, that's the Jefferson Bible, which I guess just sounds kind of like a history book. I'm sure it had a lot of begats, like this one begat this one, this one begat that one. That's what the Bible was. It's just the family lines. Yep. His Bible was just family lines and a little bit to do with monarchs. There's that whole Babylonian exile, but it wasn't because God was mad at him. Yeah, so sure it's probably that.
I promise.
All right, kids. So that's going to end the lecture for today. We will come back on Friday. And then after that, you'll have a house meeting, dilly-dilly. So see you later.